Hello, Athlete Mindset community. This is Lisa Bontasumi, the host of Athlete Mindset. Before we dive into this episode, I want to invite you to support the mission and purpose of our show. For $10 a month, you can help to make sure these conversations get to as many athletes, teams, coaches, and sport mental health environments as possible. As a subscriber, you will receive exclusive content and updates on current topics in athlete mental health, and you'll be directly contributing to the betterment of mental health for all athletes. Join the cause. Subscribe at sportse.io/athlete and make a difference today. Again, that's sportse.io/athlete. With your support and amplification, we can ensure more voices are heard and more individuals and communities are positively impacted. Welcome to another episode of the Athlete Mindset Podcast. I'm super excited to have Kelsey O'Connor with us today. Kelsey is a motivational speaker and former D1 softball player from NC State, North Carolina State University. For those of you who don't know, she suffered a head injury that abruptly ended her softball career and forced her to rebuild her identity outside of sports and performance. After recovering from the injury and ultimately graduating, Kelsey delivered a commencement that went viral with over 40 million views across TikTok and Facebook. Now, Kelsey travels all over the country, speaking to organizations and teams, helping them find their identity outside of performance. Thanks for being here, Kelsey.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's exciting. And you sold yourself short on this intro I asked you to send to me. But I know if you want, you probably should have had me just say, Kelsey is an amazing, resilient, wonderful, bubbly, full of energy human being. That's who Kelsey is.
And yes, that's true. Away from all the titles and things. That's so sweet. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense it'll make more sense to those who are listening because her commencement speech, which everyone needs to listen, we're going to drop the link in our show notes, but it's about who you are, not what you do. I think it's fantastic. But before we dive into that, tell me a little bit about your process towards being a softball player. Let's start there. Like, how did you fall in love with softball?
Yeah, so I grew up in a family of sports, athletic family, and it was just the sport that I loved the most. I could just spend hours on a field. I got into it because some neighbors were starting a team when I was 6 or 7, and I just immediately fell in love with it. And I just would spend hours outside by myself playing with my twin brother. And then I started playing travel ball when I was about 9 or 10. And from there, it just took off. And I had a dream of playing in college really early when I was young. And then it just kind of became my whole world. And so I grew up playing travel softball, traveled all over the country for different tournaments. And I just loved it. I just had a love for it really early on.
That's so cool. I mean, it sounds not exactly, but similar to my daughter's story. Like we pass by the softball fields. We have to pass by them to get home. So every time we leave our little neighborhood, we have to pass by them. And so I think that just kind of like embedded in her. And then one day she saw the posters out for like registration is out. Like, and she's like, I want to do that. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. It's just right here. Awesome. And so it's the same thing, traveling all over the country.
It's always so random. Yeah, I mean, I don't remember it, but I was told my neighbors were starting a team. All the parents in the neighborhood were hanging out, and they like threw up some cornhole bags to see if I could catch them, had me run to the street and back, and was like, she's athletic enough to make a 6-year-old team, whatever that was. So just a very random.
Something about it, though. Yeah, but something about it stuck with you. What position did you play?
I played outfield and middle infield, but I ended up sticking with outfield most of my time in high school and college.
Nice. I love it. I love it. So what message right now would you give to any young girl who strives to play in college? What are like the top 2 pointers you would tell them at this point?
That's such a good question. I would say number 1 would be to outwork everyone and not let anyone tell you that a school is too big for you or a dream is too big for you. But then kind of hand in hand in that, I would give the advice of go somewhere or just play as long as it makes you happy and as long as it brings you joy, and to always look for the joy in it, because it can get so easy to get, sucked into the stress. And it's a very mechanical game. It's a very, I don't know, sports itself could be really stressful. So I would just say to continue to look for the joy in it.
So wise, so very, very wise. I love it. All you all striving to play in college. Listen to what Kelsey just said. It's so important. And I second it for sure as a parent. For
Yeah.
sure, for sure, for sure. You were a student athlete. Obviously, you played softball and you studied social work. What? I'm going to have to ask about this as a social worker myself. Like, what brought you to that field?
It really was kind of crazy. So it kind of goes hand in hand with my how I got to NC State, got recruited. I was committed to a school actually my sophomore year of high school, and I wanted to be a teacher. And I was committed to a school downtown Chicago because I'm from Illinois. And then my junior year, I had just decided, through conversations with my parents, just through some own reflection, that it wasn't going to be a good fit for me. I just didn't feel like that's where I would go without softball. And I was putting all of my happiness in softball. And so it was a
Mm,
really amicable
mm,
decision. The
mhm,
coaches were great about it, but I decided that I wanted to go to a school that I would be happy with without softball. And I was starting to change my mind about being a teacher. I didn't want to be a teacher anymore. And so I decided I was going to study psychology. And I was a senior. I was heading into my senior year with no schools, still wanting to play. And then I got some interest from NC State. And as I started looking into it, they had one of the best social work programs in the country. And from some of my teaching experience in high school, I just loved working with kids. I loved that more social, emotional aspect of it. And that's why I was going to do psychology. But I had Googled NC State and saw their social work department. And I was like, that is exactly what I want to do. It was of helping people, a little bit more,
mhm.
involved with the community, smaller, major. And then when I went to visit NC State that summer out for a camp, I just decided this is perfect. This is home, softball or no softball. The social work program is incredible. That's what I want to study. This is where I would be happy. And then it was a blessing that softball worked out too, and they offered me to play. But I just kind of stumbled into it through NC State and kind of going from teaching to psychology to social work, and just knowing that I really wanted to help people, but I wasn't sure how or in what capacity. So
No, that's an amazing story. And I think again, this should be the third tip you would have said earlier about like what aspiring, collegiate softball players should or student athletes should think about is the school a fit beyond the sport? That's
mm,
so important. So especially in our sports, so I say our because my daughters, but like softball, there's not a lot of opportunities. It's growing though to play out past college and
mhm.
so or beyond college. So is it a fit for all of, I mean, coming back to your speech, all of your other identities? Let's go. I can't avoid that speech no more. We got to come back to it. It had 40 million views. I listened to it. I was inspired, loved it. You're so articulate and eloquent. When people give you feedback or comments, what are like the top three things people resonate with the most that really speak to them?
It was really overwhelming to see how many people from different walks of life basically identified with feeling defined by something. So even if it
Mm,
wasn't sport, I was getting messages and comments from people that felt attached to their role as a parent, or even this job they were in for 35 years and having to retire. So I would say feeling connected to an identity, regardless of what it was. It could have been a job or a relationship or something that really shaped them. And then also people that had experienced transition in their life. So
mhm.
retirement or a relationship ending or a loss, and just some really profound things that it was just crazy because there were so many different stories, and yet so many people resonated with just feeling like they had gotten so wrapped up in their identity being this role they had or this transition that they had to face. And then some people were even in real time saying, I'm a kind, resilient fighter. Like it was really sweet.
I
People were
love
telling me about
that.
themselves, and that
Oh
was
my
like my favorite thing
gosh.
to see. And yes,
Yeah.
that was probably just some of the feedback of people relating to the feelings of it. So it's not the same circumstances or
Yep.
stories, but just
Yep.
the feelings that we have of even just confusion and not knowing what we're doing next and not knowing if we're doing it right, getting caught in the busyness cycle and just feeling connected to that.
No, I love that because, like you said, a lot of people, it doesn't have to be coming back from an injury and finding other identities from a sport injury like yourself. But like you said, all these transitions, it's so relatable. I mean, one of the things you said in the speech was, what does it mean to be a human being, not a human doing? I love that. I think in our society, the American society, there's so many things we're striving for on the outside. And like, we want the white picket fence and the 2.5 kids and the dog and a partner and da 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 da. It's like, but who are you underneath how you are defined by others or how you define yourself? And I think that's something that I don't think a lot of people ponder or even have the answer to. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I think the 3 points, okay, I'm not going to do your whole speech because people got to listen to it. But
Okay.
but the three, I was taking notes and I was listening. The 3 points that we could consider instead of saying, I am a social worker, I am an entrepreneur, right? Or my twin brother is an amazing, like, I don't know, what does your brother do?
Funny
Oh,
that you asked this because I
okay,
bring
yes.
him up every time I give a speech.
He's
So
awesome. Yeah, your twin brother. Oh my
I
God.
love him so much.
Of
Yeah. So he
course.
actually, when I talk about it at speeches and things, I describe him first. And I tell people he is so positive. He lights up a room and he's just so funny. Like he welcomes the whole room and he just lights it up. And then I tell people he works for SportsCenter at ESPN, which is so cool. He is just so smart, just one of the smartest people I know. Everyone asks when they watch my speech how we graduated at different times, but he did a 3-year undergrad and a 1-year master's. So he just zoomed out of there. And part of even that speech is how much, him and I have compared our success and his timeline, my
Mm,
timeline, kind of
mm.
detaching from that, celebrating each other on different tracks. But yeah, so long answer to your question, but that's my
No,
twin brother.
I mean, long answer needed and welcome. That was amazing. I love it. And you're both working in sports in different ways. No, fantastic. But again, describing yourself or others by the attitude. These are the top 3 things Kelsey talks about in her speech: attitude, how they treat each other or others, what makes them uniquely beautiful. I love that. I love that. Like, so if I was to introduce my son, he's a funny, silly, he's in 4th grade, funny, silly, kind, good friend. He treats other people really well. He sees the good in people. He's very sensitive emotionally. And what makes him uniquely beautiful is that he can care deeply for people at such a young age. And he's very emotionally intelligent. Like I ask him how he's feeling and actually gives me emotions.
Uh,
So cute.
love
I'm like,
that.
really? Oh, and he's still snuggly. He still lets me snuggle with him.
Oh, sweet. That's so sweet. I love that.
So that's my subjective analysis of the 3 areas that you highlighted when it comes to my son.
Great.
But I think the whole process of you coming back from an injury, rebuilding, in your words, your identity, all that that is, the fullness of that, and coming back and sharing what you've learned in that process through just a 5-minute speech can touch so many people is really amazing. I mean, you're doing healing without being a therapist just yet.
Oh, thank you. That's really sweet. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. You spoke of resilience a lot in your speech too. What's your definition of resilience?
I would say that it is finding your joy on the other side of a difficult time.
Mm,
And I would say, like, seeing the good more than the bad. And it's so crazy because that resilience, I obviously saw it in myself and learned to see it in myself. But part of even deciding to do a graduation speech was I saw it all around me. I was in school with some of the most resilient people I've ever met, people that really had come overseas or were raising their
mm.
kids
Yeah.
and getting a degree and working 2 jobs. When I mentioned some of those people in my
Mhm.
speech,
Mhm.
like, I sat next to those people and I talked to them every day and just saw this resilience because they were going through all of these things, and yet they just treated each other with such kindness. They were aspiring to become social workers and help other people, and I just think finding that smile on the other end of a difficult time and even through it showed so much resilience.
For sure. Yes, I loved it how you highlighted them in your speech. It's easier said than done to sort of bounce back or recover, respond from off moments to kind of be on the other side and like find yourself and help, find your purpose and things like that. Could you share a little bit about your process? Because I know recovery from your injury was intense. I mean, from what I gather, and like, what could you say to those who might be facing some kind of recovery from something to move through and transition or an injury or something to come out
Absolutely.
the other end? Like, yeah.
I love that question because I love talking about the speech and the good on the other side of it, but it is really important, that took a really long time. And so I had the injury. The first few weeks after the injury were the toughest. It was just I struggled with a lot of symptoms. I mean, I mentioned in my speech, but I struggled with confusion. I was in pain all the time. It was a head and neck and jaw injury all at the same time. So
And
I,
you suffered this on the softball field?
yes, so I was at practice and I was running bases. So I was at first base.
Yep.
And then our shortstop, the ball was hit to the pitcher. Our shortstop, who was like 6 foot tall, she is coming through to turn a double play, but instead of making a lane on either side of the base path, she came straight through. So as I was sliding into second base, her full body knee first just came straight into my face.
I can picture it.
Yeah,
I can just see it the way I can just see it. Wow. Wow. Wow.
in an instant. Yeah, so it was abrupt. It was middle of practice on the softball field my junior year. And what made that really difficult was I actually, crazy enough, I had had multiple concussions in high school. So I had been through
Mm,
months of recovery. I had had
mm,
occipital neuritis. So I had some nerve damage from some concussions. I had post concussion syndrome. So I had been through these head injuries before, which I think both made it worse the fourth, fifth time around, but also made me recognize that this one was worse.
mm,
And because it was a straight hit to the face, I had whiplash. I had braces put on to fix my jaw. They were talking about jaw surgery. So pretty instantly, it was softball, and then it was 6 doctors, recovery, and it was the first time that I had ever had cognitive symptoms of pure
mm,
confusion, emotional outbursts, and, like, truly the drastic roller coaster of sadness and anger and frustration
mhm.
and just all of it. It was really difficult for my family and just it kind of, made me realize I had put everything into softball, but I had really tried to balance out, being a student, being a good teammate. And because of the symptoms affecting my personality, affecting my mental health, even that was gone. So I was struggling to read and write. I started failing my classes.
Wow.
I was an
Wow.
angry person. And so even those other things that I had kind of placed, being a good social worker, being a good daughter, even, I wasn't any of those things anymore either.
Mm,
And because it was an invisible injury, my softball program did not handle it with kindness. And so, at the same time, all that's going on, I kind of lose my community because after a
mm,
few weeks, they were like, when are you coming back? Why are you taking so long? Because they couldn't see it. And so, pretty much in the span of 6, 7 weeks, it just flipped completely upside down. And so I lost my community, my whole identity, my abilities, my sport, this dream that I had invested in, and wasn't even sure I was going to finish school or, come back the same as a person. So the door of softball shut, but I was even just unsure if I was going to have the same abilities or just even the same, I like to think I'm a happy, bubbly person, and that was just completely different too. So I think going back to your question, recovering from that, it was just a one step forward. Some days it was just get up out of bed. If I was lucky that I had support in my family. My family had just moved to Raleigh, and so they were really
mm,
close.
mhm.
And being able to pick up the phone and call someone was really a saving grace for me because I just had to start with little goals. So in that
Yep.
recovery, before that focus and, attempt to get better happened, it was kind of a self-destruction mode of feeling like I lost everything and feeling that sadness and needing to take the time to honor what I had lost and honor that it was so important to me and really allowing myself to sit with that. My family was really great about that, talking with me about why it hurt so bad to lose softball and these teammates I had. and just working through that before then deciding how to move forward and how to look for the good and be grateful for the resources, the medical care, the
Hmm.
education, and the people that were supporting me to get better. And I didn't know if I was going to get better, but I just would close my eyes and picture myself in a better space. And that actually really helped me a lot to get to that healing place. And by the grace of God, I did heal and recover really well. But just visualizing myself there was the most helpful thing. So for someone going through that, I would say honoring the thing that you're going through and honoring that it's difficult and allow yourself to feel through it so you can get to the other side. And then even just, finding and noticing little things to be grateful for doesn't diminish what you're going through, but it will help
Hmm.
you get there to the other side.
No, again, so very wise. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I know that was beyond difficult for you and your family. So thank you. I mean, we share our stories and it's another level of our own healing. And then we inspire others as well as you do in your stories from the commencement speech, everything in between to now. The inspiration is really, really fabulous.
Yeah.
I think that you highlight so many things, honoring and not acknowledging, honoring, naming what you're going through and not pretending that it's, oh, well, someone else has gone through worse, so I'm good. Like I hear that a lot. Like we're not comparing yourself to someone else. We're sitting in your experience right now. So I
Yeah.
think that's right. That's so valuable. I think the imaging is so huge. I use it a lot in my sports psychology work, the mental performance work, and injury is one of the major places that we use it. Because, as you know, when we lose so many things, our sport, our community, our abilities, whether we're going to finish school, can finish school, we grieve that. There's a grieving and a mourning process that happens when we lose something, especially a series of things all at once with one action, one moment,
Yeah.
right? So much is lost. And so we have to allow ourselves to grieve and whatever that looks like. Everything you mentioned, the sadness, the frustration, feeling depressed. Like, is this really happening to me? Like all the different things that go in the stages of grief is so important to name and normalize that that's what happens. Even when if you had just lost one of those things in the series of the things, like you're going through complex mourning, like so much. And the imagery is able to tap into our brain to help us see and feel and experience that actually there is something on the other side, like you said. Your support group in your family, your twin brother, I can only imagine
Mhm.
how supportive he
Absolutely.
is. Oh,
Yes. And my older brother, both my brothers for sure.
okay. Yeah. Yes. And it sounds like too, your faith also
Yes.
is really, really important for you. So everyone has their list of things that work for them. This is what Kelsey is sharing has worked and is working for you and has helped you. And again, to hear a story like this and to hear what your steps are and what your process has been is huge. So thank you. Thank you again for all of that, you know.
You. I really appreciate that. And yeah, you're so right. I mean, regardless of what it is, just that acknowledgement and not comparing to other people
Mhm.
is really where I started to heal for sure, and where some of those things came from. Even comparing how your struggles, but also comparing your success and just removing yourself from that. So I really just love that you said that, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome. You are doing some exciting things when it comes to your identity as a learner, as a curious being. Tell us about that. What are you into right now as far as your studies and the way that you're growing your mind?
Yes, so I took a year off and then I decided to go get my master's in social work. I started that this last May and I'll be graduating next
Oh,
May. So
awesome.
I
Let's go. I love it.
yes. We love social work.
We do.
It has been incredible. I just feel like everything that I learned through social work applies to life, applies to people. So I feel like I'm constantly learning things that are applicable to relationships and just how I view the world, my everyday. And it's been really great. So I'm back doing social work and I'm applying it to a sports setting. So my internship and some of the work that I'm doing with the department is centered around social work and sport and athletics and trying to grow that as a field and just that community and relationship between clinician and athlete and advocacy with coaches and administration. So just all the things that come into play with sports psychology, applying it to social work and athletics. So yeah, it's been really exciting. Just doing a lot with classes and field work and back on the grind, but it's been wonderful.
I love it. I love, love, love it. In addition to our field and to the field of helping our athletes from a mental health and psychological standpoint, you have a great story that your lived experience is so key. I feel like who we are and how we relate to people is our number one tool, aside from all the things that we're going to learn in the book. I like you. I feel like I'm a better, well, that's funny. How do I know if I'm better or not? But I will say, I was going to say, it's helped me be a better wife. I'm going to say a good wife and a good parent. Because I say all the time that my social work training and education was the most valuable and meaningful personal experience in addition to educational experience. It was, I grew so much, learned so much, some things I didn't like what I learned, about myself, about my family, about the world. It's tough to kind of like know what you know. You know what I mean? You read things differently, you watch things differently. Like I was like, how can I turn my mind off now and watch this movie before I knew all this stuff? I was like, well, you can't. You kind of have to like, yeah, you kind of have to turn the volume down a little bit, but it's like, you know what you know now, and we know it to help the people and populations that we have passion for. So I'm so happy. I can't wait to see, what you continue to do and how you contribute to your life, your family's life, athletes' lives, sporting environment, just our social work profession, sports psychology. It's amazing. It's been my honor. I would like, if you and your twin were like hanging at a park and just kind of like people watching and just sitting on a bench and hanging, what would you guys be talking about when it comes to athletes, athletic identity, like just chopping it up, just you guys casually, like your experiences growing up together and how it's influenced who you are together and who you are as people individually? Like, what would you guys be chatting about?
And it's so I love that you asked because just a few months ago he was here. We were having a catch talking about these things. He was home visiting and I mean, I think we'd be talking about how it impacted us growing up. And it's so fun to talk about it with him because he attended almost every game that I had. He came on all the
Wow.
trips. And obviously, investing in travel sports is a lot. And so a lot of the attention was on softball trips and where we were going. And, growing up, we
Yeah.
had those conversations and even me to him, like, do you feel like I took some of that away from you? Do you feel like it was tough? And he was like, "No, I love going on those trips. I feel like I got to see so much of the country. You always made me feel included." He always kept the scorebook and he always did the stats. And now he
Oh my
works in
God.
stats research for sports and covered the ACC softball tournament, loves softball. And so it's so cool that it makes me tear up to think that,
Kind
us
of, me
traveling
too.
together.
Lightweight, me too. Oh my God, I love that. And I'm not going to interrupt you again, but like I think about it
No,
because my son, who's younger than my daughter, how he feels about following her everywhere, all over the country, and like doing stuff. And then the fact that now he's using those skills that he practiced because he was having fun and supporting you for his career. Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. I love that
you so
story.
I love that question so much because I love talking about him, and it really is so full circle, and it makes me tear up. I was in tears the first time he called and was telling me how he was asking ESPN to put him on the softball games and, talking about it at work, and because he genuinely loves it, and I mean, he truly means it and loved traveling with me, and him and I got to make so many memories through it, and when he was applying for the job, one of the things when I was in 7th or 8th grade, one of our team things was why not us? It's a very common, phrase.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
he was so sweet when he was applying for these things. He's like, I think about it all the time. Why not me? Why not us? And we talk about these really adorable things, growing up and how he applies it to his life. I just had no idea that he was getting things from it too, and that him and I
Mhm.
really did connect and we look back at it so fondly. So and I love that your son is there too, and I just hope the same for him, I'm sure
Me
that he's
too.
gaining so much more than even see right now, and just their connection and him being able to watch his sister. And that's so beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, I hope so. We'll see about this guy. He's as his sister says, some kind of kid. And they have an 8-year age difference. So it's
Okay.
kind of interesting how they might share or not share or process or like be, but it is what it is. It is every sibling dynamic is different and
Yeah.
we'll see where he lands. I mean, she and I talk about him all the time, which is funny too. But him and I don't talk about her. But I think that's a developmental thing too. But anyway, no, we'll see. It's families are important, our sibling relationships are important. So thank you for sharing that like little sneak peek into kind of like how you guys talk and talk with one another. It's been like so moving and inspiring and like meaningful to me to have some time with you today. Like thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your stories. There's a vulnerability here that, not everyone leans into like you do. So I really appreciate it. You're going to help a lot of people when I share this, like everyone listening. It's super wise. I keep saying that and just inspiring. So I just appreciate you taking the time with everything you have going on to spend some time here and have my listeners like get to know you a little bit.
Thank you so much. I mean, I truly appreciate it. I love your podcast. I've listened to several episodes, and you just create such a open space. And I just really appreciate this conversation and what you're doing for so many people and your impact. So thank you so much for having me and just allowing me to have this conversation with you. I just really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Athlete Mindset is part of the CASSource Podcast Network. At CASSource, we love podcasts. In fact, we love building podcasts, everything from development to production. Because of all that, we're growing this one-of-a-kind podcast network. If you have a podcast or looking to launch a new podcast, then we should talk. You can message me on Twitter at Eric_Kaz or hit us up any way that works for you by searching CASSource on your social media app of choice. Let's talk about your podcast joining this one-of-a-kind podcast network, the CASSource Podcast Network.